Today I'm going to show you the steps that I took to take some scrap yarn and turn it into a purse. I chose this Simplicity pattern. It's 8310 and I'm going to do purse C, and I'm going to use the hand woven for this lighter color here. That's the bicycle print, so I'll use the hand woven for this piece and this top piece on both the front and the back. So the first thing I did was to take all the pattern pieces out and find the pieces that will be used for these, and then I measured them to determine how big of a woven piece of fabric I was going to need. And I chose some yarns. I just chose ones that were black and gray and white, and these are all yarns that I already had left over. These two are hand spun wool and the rest are commercially prepared yarns. This one is a chenille. This has got some texture to it, and then this one also has some interesting texture to it. I figured out how big I needed my piece of fabric, and then I added some to my dimensions for shrinkage, and then I used these yarns for the warp. Each of the yarns is a different thickness. As you can see here, these two are pretty different. So to determine the set of the yarn, I just determined each yarn set separately, and I determined its wraps per inch. And then because I was doing plain weave, I took the wraps per inch and divided by 2 in order to determine the ends per inch. I did 4 ends of each yarn in a random pattern. And I used this gray for the weft. It is a 8-2 unmercerized cotton and a silver birch color. I used it because that's what I had on hand and it went well with the yarns. When I was weaving it, the textures in the yarn looked very flat and I was afraid it wasn't going to turn out well. But after I took it off and washed it, the texture really shows up nicely now. I wove this on my 4-shaft floor loom. I took it off the loom and I serged the edges, and then I washed it in cold water and I damp dried it in the dryer, and then I hung it up to finish drying. I went to the store and I found a fabric for the bottom part and the handles. I'm going to use this black. It's just a real lightweight black denim. The pattern has several other things cut out of the same fabric as the upper front and back and the small pocket. Some of the inside pieces are also cut out of that, but I'm just going to cut the 2 pieces that are the upper front and back and the small front pocket out of my hand woven, and then I will use the black denim for the bottom pieces and the handle, and I will choose just a cotton fabric for the lining and the lining pockets. This process is going to be pretty easy because these pieces are just rectangles. So I'm going to measure the rectangles and then mark them on my fabric, and then I will serge those the right size, and then I won't have to worry about the woven fabric unraveling as I'm sewing it and working with it. So I cut the pieces out and then I serged around the edges, and I'm just going to follow the pattern instructions to sew the bag together now. As is typical for me when I'm making a pattern, I did not follow all of the instructions exactly. I didn't put in a zipper, and I did some of the pockets a little bit differently than the pattern called for. The biggest problem I had sewing with the woven fabric is the fabric stretched when I was sewing it together, and so I ended up with, when I was putting the lining on the inside, I ended up with my front outside pieces being larger, so I just cut them off and serged them again to make them the correct size, to make them the same size as the lining. I hope this gives you some ideas of how you could stitch your own bag out of some hand woven fabric.